Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Thursday, the 21st day of Elul, and today's additional chapters in Tehillim is 61, 62, 63. Let's begin with tzedakah. Gedolei tzedakah, shemekareves segula. Make sure every day you put up a few pennies in pushka tzedakah. And today we finishing essay 15 in Igeret HaKodesh, where the Alter Rebbe gives us a very fundamental understanding in the spheres, the attributes, the emotive attributes, as we discussed the last 2 days, the way it is in the animal soul, the intellectual soul, and the way it is in the godly soul. And ultimately this leads us to have some kind of understanding in God's attributes, that's the exact same system that God controls, runs the world, and sustains the world using these attributes. And there is a reason why God uses these attributes. It says in the Pirkei Avos, it says there's a reason why God created the world with 10 utterances, which are basically correspond to the 10 attributes. You could have just make it in one utterance, create the whole world, like saying, let there be a world and that's it. We have everything at once. But ultimately, the system, the way Hashem created, is in order for us to be able to connect to Hashem, in order for us to be able to develop our feelings of emotive feelings, the feeling of love and fear of Hashem, using these same attributes that is in us, the way Hashem created the world. So the Alter Rebbe, until now, explained the 7 emotive attributes, and now the Alter Rebbe goes on to teach us about the source, the root of the midos. The roots of the emotive attributes is the intellect. How do you develop feelings, love, fear of Hashem? Where does it come from? So, just like in our animal soul, when we see something that we like, we develop a feeling of liking, feeling of love. And something that scares us, we develop a feeling of fear. Except when we're talking about material things, it doesn't take much effort to develop those feelings, because if it's something you see and you experience it, it's in front of your eyes. But when you're talking about feelings to Hashem, then really you have to, it starts from the understanding. The godly soul starts by understanding, having a chachma and bina and das. A wisdom, understanding and knowledge. Wisdom is the awareness, to have an awareness of something. Just like when you see something that is shown to you. It's not something that you create yourself. It's being shown. You're being shown something. That is the chachma. It's the flash, like the flash of an idea. And then you have the the bina. Bina is processing what you see, processing what you understand. But you have to take it and develop it in your mind. And then there is the das. Das is the knowledge. It is the connecting to it. Empathizing with what you see. That's why they say when a child, 13 years old, that's when the das comes in. It receives this concept of knowledge, of empathizing. Is when he's 13 years old. Sometimes you have children younger that can be very, very smart, but the empathy is missing. This is something that takes maturity to develop. And this is a very important part in the process when we are talking about thinking about Hashem, there is the connecting to what we understand. And here the Alter Rebbe goes and explains another thing, that in Das, this concept of connecting has two parts to it. There is what he calls the Das Elyon and the Das Tachton, the lower level Das and the higher level Das. It is connecting, the lower level Das is connecting what you understand and becoming attached and connected to it, and until it affects your emotions. You develop the feelings towards it, and that is why this is something we have to keep on doing constantly. There is the higher level Das is connecting the Chachma and the Bina. When you have an awareness of something, you have a flash of something. If you don't work on connecting it and start processing what you see, then you cannot have a lasting understanding, a real understanding. So this is the higher level of Das and the lower level of Das. Let's see inside what Alter Rebbe says. Says the Rebbe, "U'moker ve'sheirish kol amides hein mechachma bina das." Now the source and root of all the attributes are in the Chabad. Chachma bina das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, or awareness, processing, and connecting. Hainu, a chachma hi moker aseichel amasig es Hashem. That is, chachma is the source of the intellect, which apprehends God. And this apprehends God and His wisdom, His greatness, and the holy attributes wherewith He conducts and animates all the higher and lower worlds. So, understanding God, obviously, this is something which you don't apprehend God Himself. You apprehend the greatness of God. What is the greatness of God? The chesed. Agdula is the chesed. You see what Hashem is doing, and you apprehend godliness through seeing what He's doing. So this is the chachma, is the awareness of that of this, the greatness of Hashem that exists. But then you have to process it in your mind. Bina is Bina is the contemplation of this apprehension of God's greatness and His holy attributes. And the Bina, the processing, the understanding it, goes in the length, in the breadth, and depth of one's understanding. You develop a concept in your mind, you process it in the length, meaning you can give examples from one thing that leads to another. You bring it from a higher level to the lower level, and roichav to the width, the breadth, that goes different types of understanding that you understand from it. And then there is also the oimek binasai, the depth of the bina, of the understanding, lahavin davar mitech davar, in order to understand or deduce one matter out of another matter. What does it mean? In Chassidus, it's brought down, it says, lahavin davar mitech davar, to understand one matter from another matter. It means understanding God's encompassing light from understanding God's feeling light. What does it mean? When you understand the certain things that we can see by Chachma, is the awareness. You're aware of something you see. In general, Chachma is compared to seeing, Bina is compared to hearing. When you hear, you understand, your process. Which is stronger? When you see, you connect to it much stronger. But in the same time, the seeing also has its limitations. When you see something, you can only see what you can see, a physical object, a physical thing. The Bina the hearing, with the processing it. When you see one thing, you can start thinking deeper. Where does this come from? So with understanding, of course, it's not going to be hearing and understanding. It's not going to be something so strong in you, but yet you can reach to deeper levels, to higher levels. And that is the davar mitoch davar, understanding one thing, the oimek, in the depths of it. So that is the bina. So you need the chachma and you need the bina. You need them both together. And when you have them both, then it begets offspring. What are the offsprings? The emotive attributes, feelings of love, feelings of fear, and that all depends on what is your perspective when you see God and you think about God, the greatness of Hashem, how He gives everything. What you have comes from Hashem. The air you breathe, the light, the water you drink, everything is Hashem. And all of this leads to a feeling of love. Closeness of Hashem develops a feeling of love to Hashem. On the other end, if you think about this greatness in the awesomeness of God, it can develop a feeling of awe and fear of Hashem. So that's what he says, La'ovin ma'asaga zu teldesea, and from this apprehension to beget its offsprings, shem midis ava v'yira, which are the attributes of love and awe. The thinker's understanding of the greatness of God gives birth to emotions, a love, and the fear of Him. And then there is also the other types of other emotive attributes. And the other attributes born in the divine soul, which contemplates and meditates upon God's greatness, as to how His greatness is unfathomable. So this is one type of feelings that develop. And then there is another type of meditation that leads to a feeling of awe. V'yesh b'chinas gedulas Hashem, shal yidei yizboinenus hanefesh alekiz bo tipol aleya emoso v'fachad. One aspect of God's greatness is such that the divine soul, when contemplating it, is overwhelmed by fear and dread. When you think about the greatness of Hashem, it leads to emotive feelings of fear, yira. And then the Alter Rebbe is going to say now that there is also different levels of fear and different levels of love. There is the lower level fear, and there is the deeper, higher level fear. What is the lower level of fear? So to use an example, if, let's say, this is an example, let's say you fear of authority. You're afraid of a police officer. You're driving, you're afraid of the police officer. I mean, this is an example that these days you don't understand that anymore. But what are you afraid of? Afraid to get a ticket? Afraid the authority that he has. You're not afraid of the person himself. Afraid of authority that he has. You don't want to do something not good. Even when you're talking about a higher person, you're talking about you have a king, they're afraid of the king. What are you afraid of? Again, he has the authority, and you're afraid of the consequences. But there is a higher, deeper level of fear. And the example that the Rebbe brings in another place is when you have a deeper feeling of shame and from fear, a deeper level fear of a tzaddik, when you're in the presence of a holy person, a tzaddik. When you're present of a tzaddik, you have a sense of fear, a deep respect. I remember when we went to see the Rebbe. when you're standing in front of the Rebbe, your kishkas were turning around. You were so, the Rebbe would give out, occasionally people would be able to come and see the Rebbe when he would give out dollars for tzedakah. So people who were there, they would not go regularly. For one reason, we didn't want to make the Rebbe stand for long. So many people come. We wanted the Rebbe to rest. But also another reason was it was not easy to go over to the Rebbe. It took a lot of mental preparation, knowing you're standing in front of this person, this holy person, the tzaddik, that he's completely godly. And standing in front of the Rebbe, you felt yourself like you're so small. You're not feeling small in the sense of that you're not worth. On the contrary, the Rebbe empowered every person to feel how every person is a whole world. But when you can standing in front of the Rebbe, you feel the Rebbe is one thing with Hashem. The Rebbe is completely nullified to Hashem. And that is called the yiras boishes, the higher level of fear. It says that the thinking in the greatness of Hashem can lead to both. So that's what Alter Rebbe says, Igeret HaKodesh Ch. This is the Igeret HaKodesh, the lower level fear, which is an aspect of Malchus. Just like Malchus is kingdom, ruling. Just to be aware that there is something present here. A person who is godless, fearless, he thinks he's all alone. There's no consequences. There's no one to give an account to. But when you feel the understanding, Hashem is here, Hashem is present wherever you are, you have the lower level fear. Just like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, I wish I would fear God like I fear other people. When you see somebody is standing next to you, you're not going to do something stupid. That is embarrassing. So when you think that Hashem is here, that's the lower level of fear. There is another aspect of the greatness of God, from the contemplation of which derives Yira Yilah, the superior level of fear, in which one is awed out of bashfulness. And the same thing is also when it comes to the emotions of love. There is a higher level of love and lower level of love. There's also an aspect of God's greatness from the contemplation which derives Ahava Rabbah, the great love. The great love is really something which is a person. This is something that is, the Alter Rebbe talks in Tanya, that it's not something you can achieve on your own. It is a gift that is given to you. But after developing your own understanding of the greatness of Hashem and that you want to be part of Hashem, there's the great feeling of the great love to be completely nullified in Hashem. You want to be with Hashem. And still another aspect of God's greatness, from the contemplation of which derives Avazuta, the lesser love. So all these levels of Ava and Yira are internal emotive attributes that are fathered by Chabad. As you remember, we learned yesterday that there is the internal emotions and there is the external emotions. Ava is an internal emotion that develops the emotions of chesed, of being the kindness. And the Yira develops Gevura. So he says, the same applies to the external attributes, meaning chesed and so on. They too emanate from Chabad. They too come also as a result of understanding. Understanding about the concept of chesed leads you to want to do chesed. Now the faculty of das must be vested within all these emotive attributes. As we said before, what is the das? The das is connecting, because just to understand something is not enough. If you understand something, you can read a newspaper and you put it away and you go on with your life. But if you connect to what you read, you read about a story of something. Some people need help. And in the other end of the world, if you connect to it, then you're gonna start developing something, an emotion. For it represents the bond with which the soul is bound and embedded in this apprehension. As it apprehends some aspect of God's greatness, from which one of these attributes is born within it. So once the soul has apprehended some aspect of God's greatness, it must bind itself to this comprehension through the faculty of das. You have to have constant das, the connecting to it, the empathy. Because for a momentary removal of das from this apprehension, the emotion born of it is also withdrawn. So the emotion is withdrawn from its prior state of manifestation in the soul back into its concealment within the soul, to exist there in potential, but not in actuality. So the das connects it that there should be in actuality, not just in potential. Now the Rebbe goes on and says, this is why the term das is applied to coition. When you have marital intimacy, it's called das, like it says, Adam yada es Chava, Adam knew Eve, for it signifies a bond that results in issue, just as out of das are born the emotions. And this says the Alter Rebbe, that is the lower level das. The lower level das is connecting the emotions, the intellect to the emotions. That is the lower level das. This is the faculty of das tachten, the lower level of das, which extends into the attributes and vests itself in them to animate and sustain them. Then says the Alter Rebbe, there is also the higher level das. What is the higher level das? The higher level das is when you have this awareness of something. You want to make sure that the awareness doesn't remain just like a flash and goes by. You want to connect to it and to create a processing, the bina. And what is that das? What is that connecting part? It's something which comes from above everything. That comes from the will. When you have the will, which is an essential power of the soul, that will creates that bond between the awareness and the processing, between the chachma and the bina. Yesh b'chinas das elyon, shu b'chinas iskashrus v'chiba mekoyer ha'seichel ha'masig oimek ha'musag. There is also a faculty of das elyon, a superior level of das, through which the source of the intellect that apprehends the profundity of the concept is bound and connected to it. Like a pointer or a flash of lightning that flashes over one's mind. So you want to connect it so that the concept will extend downward. The profundity of the apprehended concept will thereby come to be understood. in the bina, in the processing, understanding it. With extensive clarification and length and breadth. This stage being the function of the faculty of bina, which is known as rechoivos anor, literally the expanses of the river, as will be explained in its place. So the chachma is like the spring, the wellspring that the water comes out. And the bina is like the expanses of the river. The river goes wide and long. That's why the chachma, which letter represents chachma? The letter yud. Yud is just a dot. Which letter represents bina? The letter hey. Letter hey has the width and the length and goes back. So this is the end of this chapter, which gives us somewhat of an understanding. And obviously it's not that we understand godliness. We don't understand godliness. It's impossible to understand godliness because God is beyond understanding. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in another place, that if just using an example, when you tell someone, I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to teach you something so deep, it's so deep that you can't touch it with your hands. That's a laughable statement. It makes no sense, this statement, because the thoughts is not something you can touch. You're talking about Hashem's greatness. You cannot say you don't understand it, because it's beyond understanding. And yet Hashem puts himself into these attributes. He made sure that the world is created using these attributes. Hashem's attributes of chesed creates through chesed. Our attributes, we can understand, we can reach an understanding of what chesed is, the way our minds understand it. But through this, being able to develop the emotions and using this to our godly soul, that a godly soul is really one with Hashem and wants to be connected. That's the only thing it wants. But the way it works is through understanding these attributes, these spheres, and that is why in Chassidus talks so much about this, because the bottom line is that this is supposed to lead the person to serve Hashem. Serve Hashem with action, to serve Hashem with our emotion, with our feelings, and having the das, having the connection constantly. So this is the end of today's shir, the end of this chapter. Hashem tomorrow, we're starting a new chapter. Have a wonderful day.